Get back on my feet again. Gotta get back on the street again, yeah. La 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 la. La 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 la. I don't know just what the world is coming to, and I don't know just what's going on, mama, to you. Well, all I really know is I gotta get back on my feet again. Help me up now, baby. I don't care if I got no money, I don't care if I got a dime. All I wanna do is dance with you, baby. Please tell me that you got the time, 'cause I've got to get back on the feet again. Gotta get back on the street again. La 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 la. Listen. La 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 la. Yeah, now baby, stand it up for me now, mom. Do me wrong, but do me right. Tell me lies, but hold me tight. And save your goodbyes for the morning light. But don't let me be lonely tonight. Say goodbye and say hello. It's sure enough good to see you, but it's time to go. Don't say yes, but please don't say no. I don't want to be lonely tonight. Go away then, damn you. Go on and do as you please, yeah. You ain't gonna see me getting down on my knees. I'm undecided and your heart's been divided. You've been turning my world upside down. Do me wrong, do me right now, baby. Go on and tell me lies, but hold me tight. Save your goodbyes for the morning light, but don't let me be lonely tonight. I don't want to be lonely tonight. No, no, I don't want to be lonely tonight. I don't want to be lonely tonight. Talking about jumping Jim, talking about the mudslide slam. Don't you know that a fish got to swim? Don't a goose got to fly high? Little dog got to die going home. Whoa, whoa, don't you know? Whoa, whoa, don't you know? Don't you know? Talking about a life on the street. Lord, I'm thinking about it, hitching my feet. Can't you hand me down them highway shoes? Good Lord knows I'm talking about the walking blues. Got the rockin' pneumonia dues. Now I'm headed home. Bye-bye. Whoa, whoa, don't you know? Whoa, whoa, don't you know, babe, babe. Listen here now, don't you come round. Talking about over yonder. Listen, bound to wake up a walking man and me. And I'm bound to warn it. Hey now, talking all about spoonily blue bones. Looking just like Sherlock Holmes. Searching for a needle in a haystack. Seen him eating lots of fat back bass. Something about a railroad track. I'm going home. Bye. Whoa, don't you know? Don't you know?
Hello, I am Adam Thorburn, and I am honored to be hosting today's event to mark the publication of Taking on Secrets, the new novel by Kevin Pilkington. As we begin, I just ask everyone to make sure that your microphones are on mute. So the agenda for today's event, Kevin will begin by reading a selection from his new novel. Then we'll open things up for a Q&A for everyone to ask Kevin questions about his novel and his life as a writer. And then we'll wrap things up at 5 o'clock. While I urge you to visit Kevin's website, which I have dropped into the chat, I thought I might start by just giving a few highlights of Kevin's professional career. Taking on Secrets is Kevin's second novel. His debut novel, Summer Shares, has recently been reissued in paperback. Kevin has published 10 collections of poetry. His poems have been anthologized widely and published in numerous journals and magazines. He's the winner of many awards and prizes for his poetry. He is currently on the writing faculty of Sarah Lawrence College. Kevin is a much sought after public speaker and educator, teaching classes, conducting workshops, and giving poetry readings all over the United States and across the globe. It is my privilege to present to you Kevin Pilkington.
Thank you for that introduction, Adam. And thank you all for coming today. So what I thought I'd do is read the very first chapter from the novel, Taking on Secrets, but I want to give you a very quick synopsis. It takes place from 1969 to 1974. It's a 4-year period. Just to set it up, Vietnam was taking place, Watergate kicked in, and our hero, Benjamin Kissel, is a young guy just about to graduate high school. He lives in Bronxville, which is a very upper middle wealthy neighborhood in Westchester. His mom is very religious, Catholic, and his dad is a dentist whose expertise in dentistry is suspect. So he has issues with his dad. So we follow him over this four-year journey. After he graduates, he goes to for high school. He goes to Eugene Lang, gets a scholarship there, lives in the city, is introduced to the city for the first time. Falls in love, or he thinks he's falling in love with a woman of mixed race who teaches him a bit about racism that, coming from Bronxville, he knew nothing about. After that, he becomes a junior copywriter. And by luck, he's sent out to work with a very famous comedian of the era. And of course, this comedian, out to Hollywood, that is, this comedian does not, I want to get down to writing right away, anything but that. So Benjamin ends up going to a very sort of drug-fueled, celebrity-filled party. Get some issues happen there. He ends up having to run back home before he can actually finish writing these commercials with this famous comedian, because there's this an illness in the family. And that's where he sort of is confronted with this sort of dark, twisted family secret that he has to deal with, and also probably recapture this woman that he's hurt, that he wants to sort of bring back into his life, that he probably is in love with. So that's, the very brief synopsis of the story. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to read the very first chapter. So if you happen to have the book, I'm sure you all do. I'm sure you all bought it already. So thank you for doing that. And if you don't, it's okay. You'll get it soon. So I'm just going to read the first chapter, and we'll open it up for questions. I hope you have questions. Chapter 1. My parents were killed, murdered. At first, I wasn't sure who the killer or killers were until I realized in moments of slow confusion that it could only be one person, me. I was the one who killed my parents. It wasn't anyone else. That is why on that June night, 2 weeks before graduation, I had my ear pressed against their bedroom door to see if I could hear them breathing. My father snored quite loudly and could be heard from my room even with the doors closed. Usually I would sleep with the pillow over my head, so I couldn't hear him. Never understood how my mother wasn't bothered sleeping next to all that noise. Now I desperately wanted to hear him snore again, but there was nothing but the loud sound of silence. I was too petrified to open their door to see with my own eyes what I had done. So I quietly began to sob as I headed back towards my bedroom. Didn't even care that the walls in the hallway were ablaze with flames, turning into thousands of tiny hands trying to grab me and pull me into the inferno. Slowly entering my bedroom, I closed the door behind me and began walking from one side of the room to the other, back and forth, knowing I couldn't stop, with hundreds of miles ahead of me. Early in the evening, my friend from grammar school, Timothy Bake, stopped by. Tim went to Bronxville High School, where there were not the same dress codes or short hair regulations like at St. Luke's. You'd understand how anyone could go to a school where you couldn't dress the way you wanted, had to keep your hair short, and most importantly, had no girls. He said it was like joining the army without going to Vietnam, and always brought this up, even though he knew I couldn't choose where I went to school. Also, he constantly brought up all the girls he was getting and how it was so easy it was getting a little boring. I found it annoying because he wasn't bragging. It was just so matter of fact about it. What made it worse was I had a girlfriend and was still technically a virgin. Tim was just less than 6 feet tall, was very thin, and wore his straight brown hair shoulder length and parted down the middle. He modeled his look after his idol, James Taylor, from the cover on the Sweet Baby James album, the one with Fire and Rain. I was rather pleased Tim wasn't as good looking, but he loved it if anyone mentioned he resembled Taylor. Tim even favored wearing faded blue work shirts to help with the resemblance. I made sure never to say he even remotely looked like Taylor. It was bad enough he was getting laid all the time, so why help his ego out any further? Tim opened the back door, leading into the basement where the TV was on and where he knew I'd be watching it sprawled out on the couch. Hey, dude, he said, closing the door behind him. Dude was a new expression. I couldn't seem to get used to it. If I lived out west or even on the west side of New York City, I would have been more comfortable with it, since it would have made more sense. So I stuck with the old reliable, hey man, what's up? Well, it's Friday night, and thought it was as good a night as any. In fact, the most appropriate night of the week to have some real fun. I liked what I heard and quickly sat up, thinking he must have a hot babe or two from school lined up, and was hoping he did, since it was more than over with Flora. I'm up for anything, I said enthusiastically. He smiled. Great, be right back. Got to go out to the car. As he put his hand on the doorknob, he stepped and turned to me. Where are your parents? Upstairs on the 3rd floor and bedded down for the night. He nodded his head and went out. I looked in the mirror in back of the couch and smoothed my hair down to look more presentable when he came back with a girl, or knowing him, girls. I figured he had them waiting in his car out front and had to make sure the coast was clear before bringing them back in. His car was an old Volkswagen Bug, a very old black Bug. was easy to notice the difference between his and the newer models that were a bit bigger, with a round window in the back and chrome fenders. Tim's Bug had no fenders, was a bit rusted around the edges, and had a bar down the middle of the rear window. It probably was one of the first to come off the assembly line in Nazi Germany. Tim referred to it as the Hitlermobile and joked that the brakes were so bad that when he had to stop at a red light, he'd open the door, put his foot out on the road. He always bought old tires to replace the older ones that were blew out, which meant they were always balder than the ones before. In a couple of minutes, it was back with no girls in sight. I was disappointed and sounded, thought you were bringing back a chick or two. Sorry, dude, got something better. The only thing that could be better than a chick or two is 3. He didn't seem to hear me as he headed over to the couch, sat down, took out a corncob pipe from his jeans, then reached for a small piece of aluminum from his top shirt pocket and placed them on the coffee table in front of him. He started to unwrap the aluminum. Forget about the chicks tonight. This will be a nice change and just as much fun. I looked at the small brown square of what looked like a piece of dirt with tiny white specks on it. I forgot about girls and had an idea of what I was staring at and started to get a bit excited and nervous at the same time. What the fuck is it? It's hash, dude, he said, not looking up as he broke off a bit and started to place it, some in the pipe. I never smoked hash or much of anything else for that matter. Everybody I knew was smoking grass. Once at a party, I took a couple of hits on a joint that was being passed around, but instead of getting high, it just made me paranoid. It wasn't a pleasant experience. Where did he get it, I asked, as I watched him get it ready. Was in the city last weekend and ended up in the village, Washington Square Park. Some dude sold it to me, said it's real good, strong shit. Ever try it before? He shook his head. Nope, only weed. I started getting even more nervous. I only took a hit or two of a joint once. Tim looked up. You know how to inhale, so you're all set. Just sit down and relax. I sat down, but wasn't relaxed. I'll go first. Going to inhale once or twice and let this stuff work its magic. He picked up the pipe, placed it on his mouth, lit a match, placed it over the bowl, then took a hit. Held it in his lungs and let it out, then took another. Okay, dude, your turn, but like I said, the dude in the park said this is strong shit, so maybe take just one hit to see how it goes. And that's what I did after Tim handed me the pipe, laid his head back against the couch and closed his eyes. It went out as soon as I started to inhale, lit it again and inhale some more. I began to choke and cough and was afraid I didn't get enough into my lungs. So I took a few more hits, a few more than I should have. Tim did a move, continued resting his head against the couch, closed his eyes and said, as if half dreaming, I'm already gone, dude. I wasn't. I picked up the pipe, lit it again, then took another hit, and this time really sucking it down. It was right after that last hit that the room went pitch black. Bright yellow lights sped towards me as I yelled at them just before they hit me, they would separate and each light would move around me. In a few minutes, another set came towards me and the same thing happened. They would separate and move around me. When 2 more came towards me, I heard Tim calling in the distance. Dude, you are really fucked up. You got to get back inside. As he grabbed my arm to pull, I realized we were outside and maybe in the street. I started to move, but his hand on my arm started to feel like a vice that got tighter and tighter until blood began spurting everywhere. Horrified, I yelled, get your fucking hands off me. Can't you see you're crushing my arm? Can't you see all the fucking blood? I was out of it, but could still tell Tim was scared. Calm down, dude. There's no blood. I'm fucked up, but you're really fucked up. After he said that, the blood was gone, and I calmed down a little, following him back into the house. I remember him leading me over to the couch. Try to calm down, dudes. Just relax. Just try to relax. You'll be okay. I got to get my ass home. Call you tomorrow. As soon as you left, I had my ear pressed against my parents' bedroom door, listening and convinced they were dead. But the more I walked back and forth in my bedroom, moments of clarity began to lengthen and kept getting longer. Around dawn, after walking a few hundred miles, I realized how stoned I was, crashed exhausted onto my bed, and fell asleep. I stayed there until there was a knock on my door. It was my mother, saying it was 10 o'clock. Breakfast was on the table. She was going shopping, and my father was on the golf course. Her voice sounded so good, and I was never more relieved knowing my folks were just fine. I was glad she didn't open the door since I still had all my clothes on and probably looked like crap. But before I got up, I knew my days of smoking anything were over. It's what I told Tim when he called me around noon to see how I was doing. You're a lightweight, dude. And that was strong shit. Should have known that the white specks meant it was laced with something. I got some weed that should be easier on you. We can try it next time. Fuck no. I'm never smoking any of that shit ever again. I thought I killed my parents after you left. Whoa, dude, really? Murdered your parents? Yeah, murdered my parents. Man, you better stay away from all forms of happy weed. After a couple of moments, he added, you must have some weird, deep psychological shit going on, man. Being analyzed by the newly certified Dr. Bake was annoying. Thanks, Freud. Talk to you later, I said, then hung up, probably more exhausted and irritated. 2 weeks later, Tim was on the Hutchinson River Parkway on his way to a record store in White Plains Mall. It was raining, and it seems that this time his tires were completely bald when his bug skidded and went off the embankment. He was killed instantly. So I've never known anyone who had died before. This way was my introduction to death. I was shell-shocked and couldn't sleep at all that night. The night one of his cousins called to let me know about the accident. Reading about guys our age who were drafted and killed in Nam was bad enough. But no one at 18 is supposed to die, not in this country or on their way to a record store. To me, death always seemed distant, an act in Vegas where a magician makes someone disappear. I started to blame God because he was available and began thinking of him as a Vegas magician, the great higher power in gold cape who needed to brush up on his act. I had seen Tim the week before the accident. I was riding shotgun with my dad on our way back from placing bags of fertilizer in my mother's garden in the trunk of his purple Chariot. It was the name I secretly gave his purple Eldorado Cadillac with a white vinyl roof. It was rather ostentatious looking, to say the least. When we came to a red light on Main Street, I saw Tim at the corner looking like he was waiting for someone. I decided not to call out to him because I was embarrassed to be seen in the Chariot. I wish I had called out to him. His hair was cut shorter. He had a blue shirt on, jeans, and was wearing a striped beige blue tie. The beginning of a mustache was making itself visible. I wanted to tell him he looked like James Taylor on his new album, One Man Dog, the one with Don't Let Me Be Lonely Tonight. And that's the end of the first chapter.
Well, Kev, that was great. Talk about getting things started off with a bang. First, let me start by congratulating you on the publication of this novel. This is so exciting. And I'm so excited to have this opportunity to talk to you about your process in putting this novel together. I want to start off our Q&A with some questions of my own, because I've been, since I have read the novel, I've been burning to ask you some questions. And I want to start by asking you a question that I know is like on many people's minds and has been asked of you multiple times, is the difference that you find as a writer, as a novelist versus writing poetry. And if you don't mind, I want to focus on a very delicious sequence in the novel when two of your characters actually talk about poetry, which I took as a sort of metaphysical wink to your audiences who knew that you are not just a novelist, but also a poet. So Kev, if you don't mind, please indulge us by opening up your novel to page 176. And actually, Kev, can I ask you to give everyone, before it's this brief section. It's a fantastic section where two of Kevin's characters talk about poetry. Kev, do you want to give a little context for what the setup for what this interaction is?
Yeah. Basically, as I said earlier, he became a junior copywriter. He took a course at the New School where he got a scholarship, and the teacher teaching this copywriting class owned an ad agency. He said, "Look, when you graduate, in May, come see me. Maybe there's a job for you." So he ended up getting a job in this ad agency, and he's a junior copywriter. He worked on a lot of insignificant, I don't know, whatever they gave him, he worked on. Whatever, radio spots, local newspaper spots, advertising, et cetera, et cetera. So it turned out that one of their clients was Mickey Green, who was a very famous comedian. He was very hot at the time, 1970, 71, something like that. And he wanted to work on a series of, I guess, TV advertisements for AT&T. And they said, there's no way in hell AT&T will accept anything by Mickey Green because he's a filthy comic. And so we're not going to spare any of our really good writers. We're going to send you out there. So by luck, he goes out to work with Mickey Green in the Bellevue Hills Hotel for 10 days. And when he gets there, this is going to be his big break, and he can't wait to start working with Mickey Green. He's thinking, oh, we're going to be like Lennon McCartney. We're going to write everything. And so when he gets out there, the last thing Mickey Green wants to do is sit down and write. There are girls out there, there's drugs out there, et cetera, et cetera. So so you'll read what he actually wants Benjamin to do before he actually writes. But in the meantime, he thinks he's going to sit down and write the next night, but they go to a party in Hollywood, and celebrities are there. There's other drugs there, et cetera, et cetera. So they come back, of course, they can't get anything written. So, but I think on page 176, and I haven't looked at it in a while, he's talking to Mickey about writing, and Mickey admits to him that he likes poetry. All right. He says, let me see. Okay, so on the top of page 76, he's talking about Mickey, and Mickey talked a little bit about his life. And like a lot of comics, he's not the happiest guy in the world. So this famous, successful, wealthy comedian who seemed to be living the life he wanted was actually unhappy, and on a very basic level. He had a pained look on his face, and though I hate to admit it, I was feeling sorry for him. I felt like I was watching a clown without his face painted on. You created Mickey, who everyone loves, and the movie made millions. Mickey's talking about a movie he did that he hates. This is no easy task to pull off. Fuck, you're the hottest comic in the country, and with your talent, there's no reason you won't be for a long time. I thought he might say, "You're right, kid. You're right. I'm accomplished more than I ever thought possible." Instead, he asked if he didn't hear me, as if he didn't hear me, "You like poetry?" The question caught me off guard. Can't say that I do, although I never really read it, except for the stuff I had to read in high school and college. Well, don't let that get around, but I like it, especially Robert Frost. Ever read him? In school once, I do slightly remember the poem about the woods and snow. I like that one. Yeah, it's great. But I read all his stuff and realized that he and I have a lot in common. How so? Writing a good joke. I mean, a really good joke is like I used to write in the beginning. It's a lot like writing a good poem. They're both short, compressed, entertaining, can heal you. See what I mean? Never thought of it that way, but I still see what you mean. I used to think of myself as the poet of jokes, the poet of laughs. I even thought about calling myself Mickey Frost, but like I told you before, green just sounded funnier for some reason, and it's the color of money. Never heard of any poets who made a lot of money. That's true. Just don't tell anybody about this. My liking poems and Frost would be bad for Mickey Green's image. There you go.
Thank you so much for indulging me in reading that passage. Look, it was exciting for me to stumble on this and all of a sudden that your characters start talking at length about poetry and you making comments that poets don't make money and that your protagonist doesn't read poetry. I just thought it was this very
Yeah, that's the story of my life. Yeah.
well,
I've been
this is a
writing.
very long intro to asking you the question that is on everyone's mind. As a writer, when you approach writing your prose versus writing your poetry, what's the difference?
Some and very little. All right. First of all, writing in any genre takes focus, okay, care, trial and error, molding the language. And I think all writers, poetry or poets or prose writers, we're trying to create some type of unique music. All right. We want our lines and our words to create sounds and flow across the page or down the page. But as a poet, I'm foremost a poet, and I think I wouldn't be a prose writer without poetry. Poetry taught me about economy of expression, word choice, the sounds of words, language, what to leave out. And also poetry gets us closer to emotions that when language fails us, okay? And so when I'm writing prose, I want to get as close to those emotions as well. I want to create real characters. And so look, I'm a poet. I love writing poetry. I love working with language. It's like working with clay also. You bend and mold and you're working with sound. And when you write prose, the same care goes into it. The main difference is poetry is written in lines. So you take a sentence and you break a sentence at a certain point, you create a line and it changes the meaning of a particular sentence. All right. That's a very basic difference. And poetry moves down the page. Rilke said that poetry, when you write poetry, you look inward. Now, he also wrote a novel himself, by the way, because he wanted to stretch his wings a little bit. And he said, writing a novel is looking outward. All right. And I think there's a truth to that. Who might have, argue with Rilke. So poetry is a bit more personal, but I wanted to write prose because I wanted to write prose. And I think New York City actually was a big influence on me for that. When you walk down the street, all right, you hear bits and pieces of information because people are talking to one another. And many times you'll get to a certain spot and you'll say, oh, so what happened? But the couple talking already moved down to the next block, and it's about dialogue. And I thought to myself, I remember thinking some years back, I don't work with dialogue as a poet. Usually there's no dialogue in poetry. So I wanted to work with dialogue. I love to hear people talk. I love the ebb and flow back and forth of people talking to one another. So I wanted to work with that. Also poetry, you don't necessarily need a beginning, middle, and an end. You can capture a moment, all right? A brief moment in time, an emotion. But in you're writing a novel, you have a beginning, middle, and end. And I want to work with plot. I don't work with a plot in a poem. You don't have the time or the need to. All right, you capture a moment often, and that's difficult to do. Also, they're both difficult. You just have to bring different criteria to each. But I wanted to work on plot. And I think there's a good plot in this novel. I mean, I think that's why I wanted to write this more than anything, because the idea came to me after talking to people over the years. And the other thing is, I have stories in here I've borrowed from everybody I know, okay, to sort of put it in the pages here. I took a story from my brother. I took a story from a friend of mine. I took a story from my dad, a friend of mine who actually worked in advertising. It helped me quite a bit. Just talking to him over lunch. Creating plot and creating dialogue with it, my main concerns, that's what I wanted to work with for change, spread my wings a little bit, But again, great care goes to any genre you work on. Also, they bleed into one another. Walt Whitman talked about writing is a heaven of prose. So prose and poetry come together. So a lot of the metaphors I learned about, to create, I put in my prose as well, and there are so many wonderful prose writers who the images are amazing. I think it was Henry Miller who said, I don't trust poetry, but I trust the poetry I find in prose, So, read Junot Diaz of all people. He's writing about Newark, but the imagery in there is amazing. Some of those images belong in a poem. So yeah, it's poetic, and a lot of prose writers write poetry. It's not unusual. You can go through names of the writers here and come up with names. Margaret Atwood, for instance. James Baldwin is a wonderful, wonderful writer, wrote a collection of poems also that people don't know about. And you can't find it. It's called Gypsy. And I think it's out of print. And he's on everybody's tongue these days, but check out his poetry or read Jimmy's Blues. There's a lot of poetry in the prose in that novel. It's wonderful. Elizabeth Smart, who is, again, I don't know if you can find her work anymore, but she was a poet in the 40s who went to a bookstore and started reading poetry by a poet by the name of George Barker, who was an English poet. And she realized, this is the man I'm going to marry, And then she went to England, lived it great, but he was married, all right? And he had kids. She didn't care. So she had 4 kids with him, all right? So she wrote this, like, I think it's out of print. I don't know if you can find it. It's called By Grand Central Station, I Sat Down and Wept. And it's a short novel. It's the poetry is beautiful, but it's about her relationship with George Barker, and which she had to go through. So there are so many wonderful poets who write prose and prose writers write poetry. So I just think, you're working with language, you're trying to create music. Don't categorize it so much. Does that answer the question?
Fair enough. Yes. As a follow-up to this question, and folks, I do want to give other people a chance to ask some questions of Kevin. I could certainly talk to Kevin for several hours on and on about his life as a writer and about the new novel. So please raise your hand or drop a question in the chat and we can incorporate this in. I just want to have one follow-up question for you, Kev. This is about a through line that I see between your poems and this novel is your love of New York City, that New York City figures prominently as a subject in so many of your poems, but also is the central place where the activity of your novel is set, with very, very specific descriptions of street corners and buildings and restaurants. Anyway, Kev, there's another little brief moment, if you'll please indulge us a bit more, to read in the novel that is the kickoff. Here we are on page 90. Please, would you please indulge us? This is just a place where where New York City is front and foremost.
Okay, yeah, and I couldn't have written about New York in this novel if I hadn't written my poems prior to it. And I've talked in the past about how important landscape is to my work, to my poems actually at the time. They trigger my writing. And I said to someone, I was talking to somebody about the novel, and I said about this guy's first girlfriend. I mentioned her name, and he says, no, his first girlfriend is in New York City. All right. And I thought about it. I said, yeah, he's in love with New York. It's actually a homage to New York. I didn't think about it when I was writing it. But New York has given me so much. I'm so lucky I live here, because I am, again, it just triggers so much for me. And I've written about other places, other areas and other landscapes, but I always come back to the city because this is where I live. All right. So, but anyway, when he said that, this guy, Benjamin's really in love with New York City. I thought about it, and I said, yeah, I guess he's right. But this is the chapter you mentioned on page 90, if you have the book. You should all have the book, by the way. Did I mention that already? Okay. Okay, top of page 90. So this is the first time he leaves Bronxville. He got into Eugene Lang. He's going to live in Eugene Lang, and he's going to live in an apartment in the city. So he comes into the city for the first time to try to get a hold of this apartment on 8th Street. Since I still didn't know the city very well, knew the subway system even less, I took a bus down Fifth Avenue towards the village. It would take me a while before I stopped feeling like a tourist and got used to the city's sights, sounds, and pace. Growing up just 40 minutes away suddenly felt like it could have been 40,000 miles away, since everything was radically different. Although I'd come in on occasion over the years, they were quick trips to see a movie or a play. So I never really paid much attention to how the city breathed, since I had a destination to get to. Now I was going to live here. The city was my home. I wanted to find out as quickly as possible how it all worked. I like the look of the 42nd Street Library that took up an entire city block, with the 2 lions sitting out front, seemingly tamed and quiet in their concrete fur. The traffic lights through the city were strong enough to stop all the traffic, even the buses and trucks when they turned red. The apartment and office buildings were as tall as the clouds, and the Empire State Building on 34th Street reminded me of a giant syringe sticking its needle in the sky. The yellow cabs, the color of egg yolks, constantly drove past along the street, and the Flatiron Building standing alone on 23rd looked like a slice of birthday cake. I loved it all. So there you go. You know,
It's great.
Yeah, you know, again, I guess another character in the novel is the city, you know, so, and you know, how many writers have written about New York? Fitzgerald, you know, so many, some Salinger, you know, people I've read and loved, you know, so. Right.
Well, folks, I'd love to open this up, and if you have any questions, you can just raise your hand or just unmute yourself now and ask a question to Kev to join in on the conversation. Look, I have my own list, folks, so I'm fine to keep going. Yes, Tina, please.
Hi, congrats, Kevin.
Thanks, Tina. Good to see you again.
It's so good to see you.
Tina was my first year studies class at Sarah Lawrence College.
That was the first year. I mean, you were my Dawn.
Yeah, that was my first semester.
That was it really?
Yeah, my
I
first
didn't
semester.
know that.
Yeah. How nice to see you.
It's good to see you. Congrats on your novel.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much.
Basically, all I wanted to say, I'm really impressed by the writing, and I have your anthology, and I have your Tennessee Williams.
Thank you so much.
So,
I always like it. Thank you so much for being here.
thank you.
Tina.
I appreciate it.
Rachel, please unmute yourself.
I had a question about when you're in the middle of writing the novel, did you find yourself, because you mentioned about one difference was the dialogue between writing poetry and prose. So did you find that you spent a lot more time listening to dialogue, paying attention to the way people spoke, the words and such? I'm sorry about distractions in the background. Is it hard to hear? Or I can type it in. That would be better.
Let me. I gotta hear that. I gotta hear that again, Rachel. Sorry.
Very noisy household.
Okay, I think I'm in a place where you can hear me better.
All right.
So my question is, you had mentioned one of the differences between poetry and prose is the dialogue. So there's a lot of more dialogue in the prose. So I was wondering, when you are in the middle of writing a novel, do you find yourself paying more attention to what people are saying, how they speak, their intonation, the word choice? Is that something you notice more when you're in that process because you know about that difference? Or no, is it just more like in your head?
No, I think it's just more in my head. And I just want to write believable dialogue, you know. I don't think about, oh, you know, is this poetic or not? I just want it to be real sounding, you know. I want it to be, you know, 2 or 3 people talking, you know, and capture that. And again, there's also music in dialogue as well, the ebb and flow of it, you know, the give and take. So I want to capture that. It's not easy to do. And in fact, nothing's easy to do when you write, you know, nothing is. And hopefully, you pull that off. So no, I just try to capture the, you know, the speech sounds, and et cetera, et cetera. So I hope that answered the question.
Thanks, Rachel.
Thanks, Rachel.
I see we have a question from the Poets Corner. You can unmute yourself and introduce your name, introduce us, your name.
Sure. Hi, it's Meg. Hi, Kevin.
Hi, Meg.
I'm driving in my car and listening as I drive, but I pulled over to ask the question.
I'm glad you're
So-
safe. Don't talk to me and drive.
I've just started reading the novel, and it's such a pleasure, and I love your poetry, as you know. And I was just thinking about, do you have a trusted reader that's different for your prose than your poetry? And do you look for something different from that reader, and do you wait until you're finished before you share it, or maybe you don't have one at all? So that's my question.
Yeah, I have one reader. That's why I married her. Celia is my reader, and she's always been my reader. I can remember I had an Irish poet buddy, Vincent Byrne, and he said he loved poetry. Went up into his attic and wrote poetry for the very first time. And when he came down, he read it to his wife, and his wife said to him, "Well, it doesn't rhyme." So he realized that was the beginning of the end of his marriage. So I do have a good, Celia's got a good ear for language. She's an actress. She has a good ear for dialogue, but she's always read my work. I don't show it to anybody else. I just don't. I think I lost Meg, but she's the only one who reads. She reads my prose, my poetry. You have a good ear for language. It doesn't make any difference if it's poetry or prose or plays or short stories or nonfiction. You know, if you care about language, you'll have something positive to say, and I trust her. So sorry. I lost Meg. There
Well,
you
I knew she was your reader for your poetry, and I was curious when you were working on a novel, but it makes sense that she's an actress and has that ear for dialogue and all of that as well.
Yeah, and language is very important to her, you know.
Yeah.
But what I do is I'll wait, you know. It's really kind of, I'm very, even with Celia, I don't want to load up with a lot of, you know, here like 500 pages, read it for me, let me know what you think. I don't like doing that either. I'll read a section here and there and get some feedback if I'm stuck or whatever, and she does help. And poems are shorter, so it's easier that she can read in one sitting, and she'll just listen to it. She has a good ear. You know, any reader or writer has to have a good ear to create anything. So that's based. She's the reader.
That's great. Thank you. Well, congratulations.
Thanks, Meg. Good to see you.
Alexandra, do you have a question for us? Please unmute yourself. Hi.
I do. Hi, I'm Alex.
Hey, Alex.
Hi, Kevin. Thank you so much for reading today, especially the scene about poetry and comedy. I was just listening to someone recently, a very famous comic, talk about writing comedy, and it absolutely reminded me of writing poetry, sort of efficiently celebrating the mundane and sort of magnifying it for others, and the connection with the reader or in comedy, you know, with the audience. Anyway, I also want to say that nobody writes New York like you do.
Oh, thank you. Thanks.
And I'm principally a poet, I think, but I'm working on a novel, and I just wonder if you go back and forth, or if you sort of take a break from one and dive into the other, and if your poetry has changed or changes when you're writing fiction. I don't know. I find it a luxury, to be honest, to write fiction after working on poetry and learning about it from you, because I think describing, let's say, the traffic on Fifth Avenue and the taxi cabs that are like egg yolks and all that, that's just like the fun bit. And I almost want to stay in there and not manage the dialogue and the plot and the arc and all that. So I don't know. I have a hard time deciding where to focus. That's not really a question, but why don't you take it away and make something of that?
Okay. Yeah, well, you're talking about the struggle. All right. I do think I consider writing poetry and prose like cross-pollination. One helps the other. However, I do think if you're working on a novel, stick with the novel. Just write the novel, and then go to it like it's a job. Every day you show up, and even if you write a page, just keep working on it, keep it going. All right. And what happens if you, by staying away also from poetry, when you go back to poetry, you're going to write your ass off. You're going to really write a lot of poetry because you want to do that. Okay. And also the poetry that's in here. All right. And you're a fine poet, it's going to seep into your prose, and a novel, who was it said that writing a novel is like being in a dark room, a black room, and you're looking for the light switch, and yeah, it is, it's hellish, I have some novel friends, I know what they go through, yeah, you have, and it's not compressed, it's not economical, and you want to keep your reader engaged, and you want to, the old page turner thing, right? Keep turning the page because you want to keep them engaged, and that's very difficult to do. But my recommendation to you is, and we've talked about poetry a lot over the years, is that you just work steadily on the novel until you finish it, and then go back and your poetry is going to seep into it anyway. My poetry seeped into this, whether I wanted it to or not. It did, and it makes the prose stronger. So and again, it doesn't have to be, do I put this aside and put that? Just work on the novel, do it, and then get back to the poetry after. That's my advice to you. All right. I'm sure I want to read it too. So, all right. Thanks.
Oh, I also wanted to ask Celia how much she charges per manuscript.
That's very sweet. I'll let you know, Alex.
I do not see any burning questions, but I have a burning question, Kev, that I wanted to ask you.
Yeah.
One of the major through lines of the novel is Benjamin's relationship to the Catholic Church, his front relationship to the Catholic Church. He goes to a all Catholic high school, St. Luke's. He has a complicated relationship with his mother's beloved priest, Father Cavendish. And I was wondering if you could talk to us about your own relationship to Catholicism and how that might overlap with Benjamin's relationship.
Yeah, I refer to myself as a recovering Catholic, getting over all that guilt one day at a time. Yeah, my background, is brought up Catholic. And I had some, difficult relationships with priests and nuns as a kid. I wasn't the best student in the world, He did nothing for my educational well-being, I don't think, and certainly not for my faith either. But the one thing that I did take from them was in catechism class. There was a picture of Saint Michael the Archangel, if you're not familiar with him, he's the ass kicker in the Catholic Church. You know, he would have a sword and he kicked Satan out of heaven. And there was this great drawing in my catechism book of St. Michael the Archangel on the end of a cliff with his sword. His hair is blowing back in the wind like a superhero, and Satan is falling into hell. You know, I thought, man, that's an image. And I would go back and look at that image all the time. And I think that image made me fall in love with imagery, you know, and you know, and so I'll give them that. Okay. And I'm sure I could spend hours on this, and I'm not, but you know, a lot of, yeah, I mean, I don't know, I have a difficult time with organized religion anyway. But certainly the Catholic Church has been a tough go, a tough slog for me as an individual, but it's fine. I got over it, you know. And there are a lot of good priests and nuns out there. I just didn't meet too many. That's all. Yeah. So I guess yeah, sure. It's a jab at the Catholic Church, definitely. Yeah.
One of the passages that jumps out at me on the darker side is the corporal punishment document at the beginning that you released, that you quote in the early stage of the novel, which made my jaw drop. Actually, Kev, if you don't mind, because it's so stunning. This is on page 26. And it actually made me go online and Google other corporal punishment release forms from the Catholic Church that parents are intended to sign to see how, and yeah, they maybe nothing is as scary as what you include, but there are, anyway, this is still an issue. Anyway, Kev, I'm sorry. Would you please read this? And after you read it, I'd like to ask you a question about it. So
Okay.
here it is. So give a little, if you don't mind, we have a few more minutes left, folks. So Kev, sorry to sort of rush this in at the end.
Right.
But yes, so this, just to set this up, this is this release form that every student who goes to this school, the parents must sign to go to this Catholic school. So Kev, please read this for us.
Okay, so it says here, every parent of an incoming freshman or transfer student had to sign an agreement that stated they would allow Saint Luke Jesuits, under the guidance of Brother Aidan Muse, administer the proper and just punishment to their son by whatever means they, the faculty, deemed appropriate and necessary. It is unfortunate that the time may arrive when an individual student may need a physical reprimand in response to a wrongly committed act. The hand of the Jesuits, directly connected and guided by the hand of God, all the duly administered punishment will be divinely sanctioned. That's it.
Okay, I think that is jaw-dropping. Is this a version of a form that your parents had to sign when you were
No, I don't think I wrote that myself.
Okay,
Yeah.
all right, that was one thing I just wanted to, but the intent and the meaning of it is something that rings true, even if this is not verbatim something that you actually had
Right.
back in the late 60s and early 70s.
Right. And it also sets up what's to come later on with his mother and her parents, her grandparents, etc. So it sort of sets the wheels in motion in a sense. And you know what happens to the mother is really sort of dark and twisted, you know, and connected to the church. So yeah, so that was a way of sort of getting it ready.
Right.
But you know, when I was growing up, you know, Catholic schools had the ability to do what they wanted, you know, and as far as reprimanding students, physical and et cetera, et cetera. So that was then, this is now, you know, so.
Wow. Well, honestly, Kev, that passage made me want go online and Google and see, and well, there still are these like parental permission forms that are asked to say we will use.
Well, yeah, you know, there are lawsuits these days. There are lawsuits, so they have to be careful. You know.
Yeah.
So, anyway, so.
Well, folks, look, we just have a few more minutes left. I can open this up to anyone else for any additional comments or questions for our novelist? Anything else before we all sign off, folks?
Hey,
Okay,
Roger.
with
Hey,
that,
Ken.
hey, oh, Roger, please.
Roger, go ahead.
So there are 255 pages in the novel. And in one of your poetry collections, there are 78 pages and 77 poems. Which was harder to write? 77, was the novel as difficult as 77 poems, or were the 77 poems 77 times harder than the novel?
No, it's all difficult. It's just different criteria. You know, I think all writing is labored over. All serious writing is labored over. You work over it no matter what you're writing. It's all difficult, you know? And it's, you know, someone said they hate writing, but they love having written, you know? So the struggle is there. The struggle is on the page. And it better be good because nobody's actually forcing you to do it. You have this creative need to write. And so whether if you're writing poetry or prose, or whatever you're writing, a lot of work goes into it as you try to create music. Yeah.
Cool. Thank you, Kevin.
Thanks, Roger. You're the best. Thanks.
You too, man.
Thanks, Roger. You know, just under the wire, Kev, we just got a question in from Carol. It is 5 o'clock now, and I just wanted to note this for folks. But can we, Kev, I'm just hoping maybe we can just address this under the wire question from Carol. She is talking about the time that the time period that the novel is written, and I will read her question. So
Yeah.
Your novel is set during a painful and dangerous time in American history. The pushback against the civil rights movement, the Vietnam War, political unrest in the streets, and a criminal president. Did the novel provide perspective on the dangerous times that we are living in right now? Was one time worse than the other, or is this another tough time?
Thanks for that question, Carol. And it's a good one. And there's so many parallels, you know, what's the old cliche, history keeps repeating itself, you know. It was difficult then, it's difficult now. We've had difficult times even before the Vietnam era. You know, we get through it. Hopefully, you know, our democracy holds and we get through it. And we'll get through this too, like we got through that. Yeah, there's, you know, and when I was writing it, I kept thinking, and I did some research for it, and I kept thinking, wow, there's certainly a lot of parallels. When's it going to stop? You know? So anyway, great question. Thanks, Carol.
Thank you, Carol. And look, thank you, Kevin, for reading from your book today. And let me again congratulate you on the great success of the publication of Taking on Secrets.
Thanks.
So look, thank you all for showing up today, for everyone who came today. And I will see you all at Kevin's next book launch, okay?
Thank you, Adam. You were excellent,
Thanks
as
a lot.
always.
Thanks for
Thanks a
spending
lot.
the afternoon with me.
You're the best.
Thank you.
Tina,
So long,
thank you.
everybody. Take
Tina,
care.
thanks for coming from California. Thank you. All right.